Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of the First Stars Podcast, fifth season. Be sure to like and subscribe. Enjoy this amazing episode because Jeph Loeb boards the mothership, discuss Batman Hush 2 and X-Men of Apocalypse. Now, come on board as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Loeb. Thank you for coming to First Stars Podcast.
Uh, how you doing? And it's Jeff. Mr. Loeb is my dad.
All right. Well, Jeph, it's been an absolute honor having you on my show. I'm a big fan of yours. So we're going to talk X-Men. We're going to talk some Batman. We're going to talk you. So I greatly appreciate you doing this for me.
Uh, let's have fun. And
So,
hopefully anybody who's listening to this has some fun too.
so I always start off with a question of inspiration. So what inspired your love for comics and writing and who your earliest influences?
Wow. I started as a fan, as many people do. Um, I began with Archie, had a crush on Veronica. Um, that led me eventually into DC. Um, my first memory was there was a Superman comic. I was at summer camp. I'm like 8 years old, and oddly enough, Superman had died, and his uh, body was put in I don't know why, but a glass coffin, and then sent around the universe so that people could come out and pay homage to the world's greatest hero. Um, and it actually had, I thought, one of the most brilliant uh, sort of escapes. It wasn't an imaginary story; it was a real story.
Hmm.
I love that we call them imaginary and real, but it was, an incontinuity story, and he had died of kryptonite poisoning, and they went past a couple of worlds, and people threw flowers onto the coffin, and then finally they went past Bizarro World, and the Bizarros threw either white kryptonite or blue kryptonite. I can't remember which kryptonite hurts Bizarros and which hurts plants. And I think it was blue, and they threw them somewhere Mark Waid is spinning. And they threw the kryptonite at the coffin instead of flowers. And because it killed plants, it killed the bacteria in the kryptonite virus, and Superman lived. Which, you know what, for a 1960s comic to have that kind of what I call clever writing, I was pretty impressed.
Hmm.
And I was 8. Uh, so I got into that. I knew there was something different about Marvel Comics. It was just seemed like they were older.
Hmm.
I didn't really gravitate towards Spider-Man, which is usually the gateway for that, because his problems always seemed to be about having a girlfriend. And at 8 years old, I didn't really understand the purpose of that. Um, so I became a DC fan first, mostly Superman and Batman. Uh, and then it was really about Neil Adams. Just looking at Neil's work was uh, it, it was just incredible to me, and so much more sophisticated than anything that was I'd ever seen in comics. Again, you have to remember I'm like 10 years old, so it's not like
Yeah.
I have any opinion or right to say any of these things. Um, and time goes by, um, through a series of what I call comical errors in life. I wind up living outside of Boston. My stepdad at the time was the uh, senior vice president at Brandeis University. He comes home one day and he says to me, "Do you know a comic book writer by the name of Elliot Maggin?" Uh, and of course, I knew the name, and I knew the name largely because he worked with uh, uh, Neil Adams, and so he said, "Well, he's a student at Brandeis. Would you like to have him over for dinner?" And I was like, "Sure." I mean, I had no idea,
Hmm.
you know, what we were going to talk about, and he was like, "I was a high school kid, and he was a college guy." Like, okay.
Yeah.
Uh, anyway, I met Elliot, and um, he just encouraged me to. I had an interest in creative writing, but I didn't know anything about comics.
Hmm.
For somebody who had been reading comics, I didn't have any idea how they were made or anything like that. So he gave me a few scripts to give them something to look at and what it should look like. Um, and I wrote a script and sent it to him. Um, and that's will take us down a whole nother road. So just needless to say, he gave me a lot of notes and got me a autographed copy of the Green Arrow story that he did with Neil, which is still in my collection and treasured. Um, and then, we have to sort of jump forward in time. Eventually, I would be lucky enough to meet Tim Sale, and I would be lucky enough to, because I worked with Tim on Challenging the Unknown, also at DC. Um, he introduced me to Archie Goodwin, and I would probably say that Archie is, without a doubt, uh, was the finest writer and editor I've ever met and will ever work with. And I've worked with some extremely talented people, both at Marvel and at DC. Um, and then it really just became, I think it's not a secret to anybody, but I was actually making a living writing movies and writing television. Comics were my side gig. They were just something that I was doing because I just loved the form. It wasn't how I was making a living. Um, and just one thing grew after another. I got a phone call one day from the folks at Marvel that had read the first Batman Halloween special, and they asked whether or not I wanted to work in the X-Men office. And then I was working in the X-Men office at the time when Age of Apocalypse was going on, and so uh, once you sort of start to work and have success, which is important, um, they have plenty of work for you. And
Hmm.
so I mean, it got to the point where it was crazy. When I was on the show Heroes, um, I was writing and producing that show. Um, and at the same time, I was writing 5 comics a month.
Hmm.
How I was doing that, I cannot tell you. When my present age self looking at that age self going, if I could go back in time and go, I don't know how you're doing what you're doing, but you should stop doing it. It's just too much work.
Well,
Uh,
when you're doing that much, you said you're doing 5 titles and the series. Does it help to stay in that writing mode, or did you think to yourself, or were you worried approaching burnout for doing that much writing at one time?
I this is one of the secrets of my life, which uh, nobody understands. When I started on the last Halloween, which we just completed, the tribute to Tim Sale, and it was the fifth in the long Halloween saga that we had done, and the only one I had done without Tim. I had to go back and reread uh, the prequels, and then Long Halloween, and then Dark Victory, and then Catwoman When in Rome, because I had to make sure that it all flowed through. Because last
Hmm.
Halloween was to tie up everything that I had left. Because along the way, Tim and I had left some breadcrumbs that we were going to tell another story another day. And I'm halfway through Long Halloween, which I should just remind everybody I wrote it. And as I'm reading it, I have no memory of the story at all. I have no memory of writing it. I have no memory. I'm holding a book that's 420 pages long. I don't think I could write anything that was 420 pages long. Not only did I write it, I wrote the sequel, which is Dark Victory. That's 430 pages long. So there's over 1,000, when you put in How One Went in Rome, there's over 1,000 pages that Tim and I worked on together. And I, I I don't have any memory of it. I don't have any memory of working on it. I don't, and it may just be that there's a function of my brain that doesn't work properly.
Yeah.
Or it may just be that I I have very vivid memories of seeing the pages, um, because I that's the thrill of working in comics for me. Um, uh, but the, the being able to look at artwork as it comes in, I have a memory of every single moment. I remember every page that Jim Lee drew of Hush. I remember seeing the pages come over my fax machine or on my computer, and that's the little kid in me just getting so excited to be able to see this beautiful, incredible work that everybody. I mean, I was talking with Ed McGuinness the other day, and we realized that, we were on between Superman and Superman Batman, we were writing Superman for over 5 years.
Mm.
And I can remember every single page he drew. I have no memory of any of those stories. So like if you brought me those stories,
Yeah.
it literally would be like, oh, cool, brand new stories. And then I'd be looking at them going, wait, I wrote this. Um, uh, and I guess it was just, I think it's just because I'm so in the story itself, that it's it's a little bit like watching somebody else's television show. Like I watch it, I'm fascinated by it. It usually I'm more fascinated by the process, like where the camera is, how it's lit, how the actor's doing. Ooh, that was a nice piece of dialogue. Oh, that's a clever twist I didn't see coming. Like all those things are going on in my brain, but what's not going on in my brain is, yeah, I spent about a month writing that and getting it and trying to meet the deadline and doing all the stuff that comes along with being a professional writer. Um, but the and oftentimes there'll be things that I remember, like when I wrote Commando. Um, One of the things, there's a I tell this story a lot. There's a moment in a movie that I had nothing to do with called Working Girl. It's got Harrison Ford and Sigourney Weaver and Melanie Griffith, who was a huge star. She was the star of the movie. The other two people were not the star. And she is literally the working girl. And in the plot, no spoilers, but in the plot, she comes up with an idea which eventually Sigourney Weaver is this awful woman that she works for who takes credit for all of her ideas. Not a new idea, but it was fairly new when the movie came out. And there's a moment that takes place in an elevator where the boss of bosses, in order to prove that Melanie Griffith actually came up with the idea, says to Sigourney Weaver, where did you get the idea? This is such an unusual proposal. Where did you get the idea? And Sigourney Weaver goes, oh, I don't know. It was just one of those things that occurred to me. And then I thought I'd see whether or not it was going to work. And then Melanie Griffith says, no, the reason why I came up with that idea was because I saw this article about investing in radio and how that might work together with the company, and that's why I thought the two companies would merge together. She had a whole explanation as to why she had come up with this idea.
Mm.
And I've always found that fascinating. That like, where do the ideas come from? What is the thing that made it click together? And I was on in commando. I was sitting on a plane going from New York to LA, and the where my seat was, I could see right into the galley. And there was really no way to get into the galley unless you passed me, because my seat was right by the entrance to the galley.
Mm.
And so I was reading something or whatever, and I looked down, and then I looked up again, and the flight attendant, the stewardess, as it was called then, was in the galley. And I thought, where did I don't understand. She would have to have walked past me
Yeah.
in order to get in the galley. And so I don't know what possessed me, because I never talked to anybody on a plane. I got up and I went in and I said, "Hi, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to hit on you. I'm not trying to find out anything about you. I just wondered, where did you come from?" And she looked at me and she said, "Oh, I'm from Kansas." And I said, "No, no, that's not what I meant. I'm sitting literally right there. How did you suddenly appeared in the galley?" And she said, "Oh, I was downstairs." And I said, "What do you mean downstairs? We're in a plane." And she said, "Oh no, where do you think all the carts go where we serve the food?" And I went, "I don't know. I had never even thought of it." She said, "Well, we have a little elevator here." And she opened these two little doors and showed me where the carts go, so that you go down into this whole storage area that's underneath the plane. And I said, "Can I?" So if someone wanted to get on a plane, and there was some, because in those days you could actually wait at the gate,
Yeah.
and you didn't want to go back up the gate because that person would then know you didn't get on the plane. But could you get on the elevator and go down while the plane is still on the ground, and get out where the baggage is? And she thinks about it for a second. She goes, "Well, yeah, I guess, but why would anyone want to do that?" And I sat back down, and I had the whole movie of Commando in my head. It was just
Mm.
like, okay, so he gets on the plane takes off. He now has until the plane lands, and all we had to do was find the furthest flight that you could get, which turned out to be like 18 hours into Thailand or something. And as long as he had gotten off the plane in Los Angeles, he had that amount of time to go get and find his daughter.
Mm.
And all of that happened literally while I was sitting on the plane. Like, I saw the whole movie in my head. So to go back to your original question as to what were some of the influences, that's kind of what happens, is that
Mm.
I sort of come up with an idea, which is like, for example, I'm writing the X-Men of Apocalypse right now.
Mm.
And the basic idea was, since I worked on the original one, the one thing that always bothered me was that when time flipped back around again, it was like a dream. And I think dreams are cheats.
Mm.
I think that dream episodes of television, dream movies, dreams, that anything that even, I mean, what's great about the Wizard of Oz is you don't really know whether or not it was a dream or not.
Yeah.
Um, it's just everyone thinks that Dorothy had a dream, but to Dorothy it was very real, and to anyone who was watching it, it's lit up that way. Um, but I mean, a real dream episode where, like, Clark gets hit on the head with a piece of kryptonite, and the next thing he knows, Lionel Luthor is his father, and Lex is now lives with Jonathan and Martha, and then at the end he wakes up, and oop, it's a dream, and you go, okay, oops, I just wasted an hour of my life. Um, so I try to with that's what happened with the Age of Apocalypse, and and then the editor-in-chief, who go nameless, and I had a huge fight at the end where I was like, I just don't understand. Like, we've had this incredibly successful Age of Apocalypse story, and at the end of it, nothing's different. It just we just saw a mirror world for a while, and then it's over. And he said, well, what are you talking about? And I said, well, think about a Rubik's Cube. And I'm asking you is during Age of Apocalypse, it was all shaken up, and we have to put it back to the way it's supposed to be. Except what I'm saying is that on one side, it's all red, like it's supposed to be, but there's one yellow square. And my editor goes, I don't know what you're saying. We don't make Rubik's Cubes. I said, no, I understand that. I was using it as a metaphor. But what I'm saying is like one of the characters, what I said, look, here's the most obvious one, which is when it flips back around, Wolverine has one hand and he's the Wolverine from AOA. And our Wolverine doesn't exist. And we play that for a year. And now you have a traitor in the mist and all that. But obviously, we can't do that because the Wolverine from AOA only has one hand.
Right.
So, like the moment he walks out, everyone goes, "You're not the Wolverine we know." But I said, but everybody else sort of looks the same. Like we could swap a character or three characters. And this turned into this whole conversation. And finally, he says to me, "Okay, fine. You know what? We'll bring over X-Man," which was the book that I was writing. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't help us at all. There's no X-Man in our universe. Right. He goes, yeah, but you'll get your own book and that'll be the way. And can we stop having this conversation? And I was like, no, which is why I'm only on X-Man for 5 issues, because this fight just went on. Right. And so, cut to 30 years later, I get a phone call from CB Cebulski, who's the editor-in-chief. And he said, is there an X-Men story you want to tell? Because we're now rebooting the whole thing, and Tom Brevoort is the new editor. And I said, there's only one X-Men story I want to tell, which is how I thought Age of Apocalypse should have ended. Where it mattered, where it made a difference, where something to our universe was significantly changed by what happened in their universe. And that's the story that we're telling right now. And the next big question was, and this is something that will influence every story I tell, which is I always ask whenever an editor calls and says, do you want to work on Spider-Man? Do you want to work on the Hulk? Do you want to work on whatever? I always say, guys, it's not ever about the story, and it's not ever about the character. It's about who's going to draw it. I would not write the same movie for Arnold Schwarzenegger that I would write for Tom Cruise. Both are terrific actors. Both have a certain skill set. So it would be a different movie. It's not even a question of taking the same story and changing it so that it's for this other actor. I've had to do that. But if you just give me the bone and say, you're going to do the Hulk, well, the Hulk with Ed McGuinness is one thing. The Hulk with anybody else is completely different. So I always say, who are we going to do this with? Who's my partner? Who's the person that I'm, as an architect, designing the blueprint so that I can then know what the building is going to look like, but allow the artist the opportunity to take my blueprint and improve it, which is why I think if I've had any success in this business at all, it's because the artists that I work with take my story and elevate the story. So that, because when I'm writing Batman, a Tim Sale Batman is not a Jim Lee Batman, is not an Ed McGuinness Batman. They all have their special skill sets. And I would write a different kind of story for each one of them so that the reader gets a different reaction to what's going on. They're all Batman stories. There's no denying it. They're all Bruce. They're all Catwoman. They're all the same, but they're all very different in terms of what the visuals of it is, in the same kind of way that I would never write the same script for a different director, for a different actor. Those things have to be taken into consideration. It's why it's so hard in, particularly in movies. In television, it's different because you have sort of, particularly if you're joining a show that's already in progress,
Yeah.
like I did with Lost and like I did with Smallville. They were already cast, so that when I went on those shows, it was like, okay, well, this is the way Jack sounds. This is what he would do in this scene. This is what Sawyer would do in this scene. So I understood that right away. It was like comics. But when you're creating Commando or Teen Wolf out of like nothing, and you don't know who's going to play the part, you it's a more difficult game. And everyone knows we wrote Commando for Nick Nolte. And because I'd seen 48 Hours, and I loved the idea of like this SEAL Team 6 kind of guy who'd sort of gone to pot. Like he had a big belly, and because he was in love with his wife and he was in love with his child. Like he had walked away from violence. So the question of the movie was, could he save his daughter? Because it had been so long since he'd been that guy. And once Arnold Schwarzenegger joined the movie, it wasn't a question of whether or not he could save the daughter. It was just when. And I'll tell you a little secret: the movie's 90 minutes long, so he's going to save her in 88 minutes. That's what's going to happen. So it just became a movie about, okay, how many things can we put in his way to keep him from actually getting it? So if I'm doing a detective story with Jim, there's going to be a lot of physical Batman problems along the way. If I'm doing the same story with Tim, there's going to be mystery elements that confound him along the way. And when I do it uh, with Ed, it's kind of a combination of both. It's a little bit of a detective, but it's still a lot of the bamboo. Part of the joy of working on the Red Hulk with Ed was that it was just every issue was, who are you going to punch? Like that was what the story was about. Like, let's have him fight Thor. Let's have him fight the Watcher. Like, let's just do all the cool stuff that we can do and let him be far more brutal than the Hulk, because he doesn't have to be a hero. He's a villain.
Right.
So but if I had done that same story with any other artist, it would never have had the impact that it had. I mean, it's one of the things that I so admire about what Jack Kirby and Stan Lee did together, was that it didn't matter what they were working on. Jack was so skilled at every single one of the characters that he created that his X-Men story was great, his Avengers story was great, his Fantastic Four story was great, his Thor story was great. It didn't matter the look, the feeling, whether it was cosmic or whether it was just a little quiet moment of Ben Grimm, the Thing, standing in the rain. It had such power coming off of the page that it was Jack who made it come to life. Stan stole great stories. Did I say stole?
Yes.
Stan, we can edit this. Stan wrote great stories, but it was Jack that brought them to life. That he gave it, to want to be a geek. He gave it the power cosmic, because those same stories, drawn by other people, no one's ever been able to touch that. Like, and I'm talking about the geniuses of our business. And look, I'm still a fanboy. Like there'll still be Neil Adams, there'll still be Steranko, there'll still be Arthur Adams, there'll still be people that I've been lucky enough to work with and people that I hope to work with someday. Um, but there was only one Jack. Like
Hmm.
that's he's sort of in a he invented the form. So you're just chasing that no matter what you're doing.
Hmm.
And then along the way, there are guys that are special and you know and when I see someone who's telling a story that's surprising and has a movement to it and has an emotion to it and has a power to it, that's when I get excited. That's when I go, I can't wait to work with this guy. Like I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen, but at some point, someone's going to say to me, you know, do you want to do Wonder Woman story? And you know, I mean, that's the perfect example. I was talking with DC. They asked me whether or not there was a way to tell a story that had the same kind of feeling of Superman, Batman, but that it would be Superman. It would be Batman and Wonder Woman.
Hmm.
And I literally could only think of Jim Chung. Like I'd never worked with Jim. I had been waiting patiently since Young Avengers to work with Jim. Um, and I said, if you can get Jim, I'm in. I'll do as many Batman, Wonder Womans as you want me to, as long as I get to work with Jim. And every page is a masterpiece. It just is. I mean, if he was here, he'd be going, "No, it's terrible. No, no, don't say those things." And that's part of the joy of working with him. Whereas when you're working with Jim Lee and every page is perfect, Jim goes, "Yeah, I know, but I got to get another one page done." Like
Hmm.
that's it just moves past it.
Well,
And Tim is on the other side. Like Tim would turn to the page and he would go, "Do you like it?" And I would go, "It's amazing." And he would go, "Tell me what you like about it, because I'm not sure, and maybe I should do it." And I like there wasn't he had a confidence to it, but he wanted to make sure it was what we had talked about.
hmm.
And so everybody's different.
So, I mean, like I said, you've had this amazing career. Um,
Lucky. I don't call it amazing.
well, from an outsider standpoint, it's been amazing. Um, when you think about the collaborations you've done, both in you've collaborated on scripts with I believe you said with Matthew like Wiseman. I know you did a lot with him. You did a lot with comic book artists. Which do you feel is the more true collaboration when you're sharing script writing with someone, or when you're doing comic books with the artist?
They're very different. It's a little bit like, do you like Simon and Garfunkel or do you like Paul Simon? And I'm not saying I'm Paul Simon, and I'm not saying that I can touch the hem of somebody that's great. I'm just saying it's each thing has its own magic to it. Um, I certainly, I worked with, I've had sort of three careers. One which was in movies, and that was with Matt. One which was in television, and that was by myself. And one which was in comics, which was by myself. But it was never really by myself in any one of those things, because
Hmm.
when you work in television, you're with a writer's room.
Hmm.
And I've been lucky to work with, I mean, when you get to work with Damon Lindelof, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Damon's going to make it better. So it gives you a kind of incentive to do your best,
Hmm.
but never worry about it because Damon's going to be able to do it. If you come up with a story idea and you're working with Joss Whedon, again, doesn't matter. Joss is going Joss is going to take it to the next level, and it's not a level you're ever going to get to be on. So you might as well just enjoy the magic of what he's doing.
Yeah.
And then I've worked on shows where the person that I'm working with, I know I'm better than, and so I know I'm the one who's bringing the gift to the page.
Yeah.
Um, but and then I got a completely different experience when I was at Marvel, where I was the executive. I was the one who was talking to the writer to say, what if we tried it this way? But they had to do the execution. They had to make it work.
Yeah.
And when you're working with somebody like Steve Lightfoot or Eric Olson, Eric did one of the seasons of Daredevil, Daredevil season 3, which many people consider the best. Um, Drew Goddard was on that. Steve DeKnight. I mean, we're talking about people that like they don't need me in the room. They like I was there to correct punctuation as far as I was concerned. Um, but there were other shows that I worked on there. I mean, we made 300 hours of television, and while we were there, some of it needed a lot of work, and some of it needed nothing. It just needed polish. Steve Lightfoot's Punisher. Like I would just enjoy going into the room and have Steve tell the story. Because at the end of it, I would go, okay, great, let's put it on paper. We need to shoot this in 2 weeks. Um, and then the same thing is in comics. I mean, if I had to pick one person, obviously my relationship with Tim was unmatched. And I think that a lot of people enjoy my work with Tim the most. And I think it's because of Tim. I don't, a lot of people say, well, but your writing was better when you worked with Tim. And I would go, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I'm the worst judge of it. Um, all I can do is say to you, I know what it is. Like when people come up to me and they say, I read Spider-Man Blue, I read it every year, it makes me cry on Valentine's Day. You make me remember who Gwen was. Then we succeeded. But I don't know that if you just read my script, that you wouldn't go, wow, it's not as powerful. Well, it's not as powerful because it wasn't designed to be read as a script. It
Mm.
was designed to be drawn by Tim.
Yeah.
And even if someone is as that I am crazy about, like Jim Lee, had drawn that story, I'm not sure it would stand the test of time.
Mm.
Um, I'm just I'm just lucky. Look, we've completely left out Michael Turner. Michael had the ability to sort of take whatever I wrote and go, oh, you meant it to look like a James Cameron $400 million movie. I can do that. And so each thing has its own little thing. I don't know anybody who can draw Biff Bam Boom better than McGinnis.
Mm.
Like when somebody hits somebody, that power comes across the page in the way that because he studied Jack for so long
Mm.
that it came across like Kirby. Um, when with Jim, it's like the level of detail and the level of how things. I mean, Jim used to say to me, I remember this once. The Huntress pulls up in Hush, and she's on this brand new motorcycle that Jim designed. And he called me and he goes, "What do you think?" And I said, "It's beautiful. I mean, what do you want me to say?" And he says, "And it works." And I go, "Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying to you. It works." He goes, "No, no, no, no. The motorcycle works." I go, "I don't know what you're saying to me." He goes, "I designed a motorcycle that if the engineers took the design, it would be a motorcycle that would work." And I would go, "That's great, Jim. If I was working with Tim, it would look like two wheels and a coffee grinder. And I'm not sure it would work." But that's what Tim knew. Because what Tim could do is he could just draw one little tiny panel
Mm.
of Batman looking down, and you'd feel more emotion than anybody. Um, I was working with Arthur Adams, and we were on Ultimate X together, and I wrote Jimmy, that was the young kid, is standing next to a boathouse. And so I'm thinking, here's Jimmy, here's a door,
Yeah.
and there's maybe a fish on the door so that you know it's a boathouse. And he sends me Jimmy inside the boathouse. There's a boat hanging down from the ceiling. There's rafters. There's fishing poles. There's all this stuff that I never asked for and took him 3 days to draw. And to this day, whenever I tell him that story, he goes, "You asked for a boathouse. That's what a boathouse looks like." And he's 100% right. And that's why he's Arthur Adams. But I would have been completely happy with Jimmy standing next to a door that said Boathouse on it. So you don't know. And that's the joy of working in comics is that if you're working with somebody whose imagination just takes my story and elevates it, that's all I really want.
Are
That's the thing.
are there great artists that you still look to work with that you haven't yet?
Yes, and that's my little tiny secret list that I keep to myself.
Fair
Uh,
enough. Fair enough.
and and here's the only thing I can tell you is that I mean I don't know how many more stories I have left in me. I or sort of thought I was done, and then I got in the words of Michael Corleone, dragged back into it. Um, but again, when we were doing uh, X-Men of Apocalypse, I really in my mind I wanted it to be Joe Mattier. I had
Mm.
started out at the same time at Marvel with Joe. But I mean, in fairness, Joe runs a video game company and makes about $1 billion. And in comics, you can make about 38 cents. So I didn't see that there was a world of that, but just getting Joe to do the covers was thrilling.
Mm.
Um, but if it wasn't going to be Joe, who was it going to be? And Tom Brevoort was really good about like, well, what about him? And what about him? And what about him? And what about him? And this guy might be available. And there were some really great guys. I mean, and guys that are enormously talented. But it wasn't what was in my head. And then I literally happened to be at Lake Como at the Como Art Festival. And I was sitting with my friend Simone Bianchi, who again, does stuff nobody's ever seen before. I mean, he's really a painter than more than a comic book artist. And and we're sitting across from, and I'm old enough now to say, we're sitting across from this kid. And this kid has a line. And I'm just like a day goes by and I'm like, who is this kid? And why does he have a line? Like all day he had a line. And so I turned to Simone and I said, who is that? And he said, that's Simone. I said, no, you're Simone. He goes, no, that's Simone. And I said, would you run out of names in Italy? And he said, I'm just telling you, his name is Simone. And the good news is that his manager is my manager. So Maddie, who has become a dear friend, will introduce you. And you can go see what he's doing. And
Mm.
go over. And in fairness, what who we refer to as Little Simone, because we have to somehow, I can't keep saying Simone because I work with both of them. So Little Simone uh, is on a Batman comic that no one's reading. No, I'm sorry, I'm not insulting anybody. If you read that and that's your favorite book, great. I love you. Don't go up on Reddit that I said something bad. I'm just telling you, nobody was reading the book. Uh, and and I'm looking at these pages and I'm like, it was the excitement of when I saw Joe Mattier's work for the first time.
Mm.
And I asked him what he was doing, and he said, well, I'm wrapping up on Batman, and then I don't know what I'm doing. And I said, do you have any interest in working on the X-Men? And we started talking about it. And this is without Marvel knowing any, I mean, for all I know, Marvel was going to go, him? He's the worst. We're never going to hire him. Um, and, I called Tom and I said, look, I haven't done this in literally decades, but I'm going to work with somebody that A, I've never worked with before, and B, I don't know that a lot of people know his work. So in some ways, we're kind of breaking him in, and and just this is the way life works. Like Tom went, I did one Hulk story with him, and I've been trying to get him to come back to Marvel, but he signed a DC deal. And I said, well, his DC deal is kind of up, and if you guys don't make a deal with him, I'll do it with him.
Mm.
Um, and it was just a surprise. It was just a happy surprise. I could have not been in Lake Como and never discovered it. And then the next strange thing was when I called Joe Mad and I said, "Listen, got to do the covers. Like, there's just no way I can do an X-Men comic without you. And he said, fine, who's doing the interiors? And as I'm saying, I said, it's a young artist. I'm sure you've never heard of him. At the same time, he's talking and he says, it better not be. And I said, it's a young artist named, and we both said Simona Di Meo. And I went, wait, did you just say Simona Di Meo? And he goes, yeah, that's not the guy, right? Like, you're not working with him, are you? And I go, yeah, we just signed his deal. And he goes, I've been trying to get him out of comics. I want him to work in my video game company. He's super talented. And I thought, okay, well then we picked the right guy. Like, if Joe Mattiera vouches for him, I'm in.
Hmm. Well,
Um, and so that's almost finished and incredibly fun.
well, as you mentioned earlier, you said a lot of your work is dependent on who your artist is, right? So how did Simone, is that how you say
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
Simone
Simone.
influence what you were going to do with X-Men Apocalypse?
There were again, it's rare when I work with somebody whose work I don't really know.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of time talking about what, because when you work with me, I'm very communicative with my artist. I don't, a lot of writers write for the editor, and then the editor gives it to the artist, and the artist gives the pages back to the editor. And sometimes the writer doesn't ever see the pages until they're printed.
Hmm.
I think that's madness. That's like writing a script and not going to the set. Like, you have to be there. You have to be part of the process, or
Hmm.
at least I do. Um, and so I tend to spend the first couple of weeks literally just every day talking to my artist and just getting to know what they like to draw, what they don't like to draw, what they think their strengths are, what they've always wanted to draw, if there's a certain character. And because Simone is young and because Simone is a bit of a fanboy, it was just fun. It was just fun talking to him about the X-Men. There are times when he talks about, stuff that I've worked on in the past, and he makes it sort of sound like he's working with his grandfather. And and there's times when I talk to him and I'll mention something and he goes, I some of it's the Italian and the English, and some of it just is he's just younger than I am. And so if I can't use movie references because he's never seen the movie.
Yeah.
He's never heard of the movie. So it's different working with him. But and the first 10 pages, he sent to me before he sent to Marvel for because I said to him, look, let me give you notes. And actually it wasn't. We had done a little 5-page story. And I I said, look, at the end of the day, you can do whatever you want. I'm not the editor. I don't own these characters. I'm not paying you. And if what you want to do is do it this way, it's fine. And he said, no, 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 Jeph, tell me exactly what you mean. And I said, I have to tell you that I saw this as a widescreen Sergio Leone movie. And if you don't know who Sergio Leone is, here's some movies, watch them so that you understand what I mean when I'm talking about a close up. I'm not talking about this, I'm talking about this.
Hmm.
So it's a language thing that you and I need to learn about each other. And the other thing is, I don't understand when an artist takes the frame and turns it like this. Like, it's like the camera goes this way. Like, I don't have a problem if you go this way or you go this way, but I don't know how or I don't know why the camera's this way. It means someone's tilting the camera, and you're drawing too much attention to the angle and not to what's happening in the scene.
Hmm.
This is one of the things I learned on Smallville was that Al Goff and Miles Miller, who were the showrunners on it, they literally had a videotape that they gave to the directors that had shots that they were looking for and shots they weren't looking for. I don't know how well you remember the show Smallville, but Lex had a fireplace in his office, and every director who didn't work there before, wanted to put the camera behind the fire so that it looked like Lex was walking through fire. He's like Satan, and he's around. I mean, you hear these pitches. And Alan Miles would just look at them and go, whose point of view is that? Who is inside the fireplace looking at Lex? And I've always remembered that. I've always thought to myself, you have to ask when you put the camera down, if it's not the audience, then whose point of view is that?
Mm.
And so it's the same thing. And so his first shot was this sort of angled shot of the bar, and it's Wolverine walking in and Sabretooth's at the bar. And I'm looking at the angle of it, and I don't know where to look. And I I said, listen, I know this is going to require you redesigning the whole page, but I'm telling you, what's important in this scene is that Wolverine is walking into a bar and a man is sitting at the bar. I don't need to see Sabretooth. That's not what's important. What's important is that there's a bar. Because once you've set that up, and Tim Sale taught me this, is if you spend time on the first panel laying out where everything is, then the rest of the page, you can go close, you can pull back, you can go anywhere you want because the audience doesn't care. They know where they are.
Mm.
If you start on a close up and you hide where they are, the reader is like, I don't, where are we? What's happening in this scene? And that doesn't mean that if you're writing a scene that you have to start outside the Daily Planet, which a lot of editors will go, can we have an establishing shot of the Daily Planet? And I'll be like, no, we're inside. We're going to be in the press room. Everyone's going to know where we are. But if you start on Clark, at some point, you better get to showing them that you're in a press room. Otherwise, you've no reason to. I mean, they could be sitting in the house. Like, you got to think about those things as it's important to the scene. Have I written scenes where I go, I don't really care whether or not this is on the roof or in the basement. It doesn't matter to me. What's important is that Batman is tied up and there's a gun to his head. That's what's important in the scene. And you can do that as you go along. And one of the things that Jim Lee taught me is he goes through the whole script and he finds the parts that are really important that are going to take the time to put in the details. And then there's some that you can just kind of get away with it because you've established what that's going to be. And then those are the easier pages. And that's how he does it. Whereas I have other artists who have to draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way out because they understand that what I've written is a musical. And so you need to know whether or not it can't all be big, 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 because when you get to that double page spread, it's not going to have any impact if everything is big up until that point. You have to build the rhythm of the story in order for it to go along. Again, I'm sure there's people sitting at home and other writers going, wow, this guy is so full of it. It's unbelievable. But it's just how my brain, again, there's no part of me that's doing this on purpose. There's no part of me that's saying, okay, I just did a double page spread. Now the next panel has to be a small panel. The part of my brain is saying, okay, we just blew a tuba. Can we go to a piccolo just to sort of stop what we're doing? Or should we now completely change scenes? Should we go to Gordon and set up a scene inside the police so that things calm down a little bit before we go back to, because sometimes what you want Batman getting punched in the face in a double page spread going, wow, that was cool. Then you turn the page and there's Gordon sitting at his desk, like trying to figure out something like a grocery list. And then he has a conversation with his ex-wife and it's unpleasant. And then when you come back, Batman's hanging upside down over a shark tank. You don't have to explain how did we wait, he got punched in the face. Now he's hanging over a shark tank. Yeah, that's what happened in between while we were writing a grocery list. That's how we got there.
So one thing you talked about as well is how you write when you're doing script writing, how you would change for a different actor, right? Whether or not it was Schwarzenegger or Nick Nolte, things of that nature. When you're writing for a comic book, let's say you're writing either, like say, X-Men Apocalypse, you could be writing Batman, Wonder Woman, Truth, things of that nature. You're writing characters that have been interpreted different ways by different writers for a very long time. You're writing, let's say, because you're writing Harley Quinn and the Joker, who has been, what's written very differently for many years. Are you writing the interpretation of that's most recent, or the one in your head that burns brightest?
Uh, the latter, the burns brightest. My feeling is, and again, this is going to sound incredibly arrogant. I don't mean to sound arrogant. Please don't write me about how arrogant I am. It's just how my brain works, and that doesn't make it right either. I'm fascinated when someone has a new interpretation of the way someone is. When they do that to a character that I created, am I happy about that? No. When they give a character a different backstory that I created, am I happy about that? No, because I may have had a story in mind. Pick up the phone and go, hey, I'm thinking about doing this with your character. When I worked with Jeff Johns and I shared an office for years, and we would just sit in the conference room and just sort of he go, so do you think if Green Lantern and Superman are together, because I was writing Superman at the time and he's writing Green Lantern, if they were together, would it make sense if Superman did this, this, and this? And he just did that out of respect. He didn't do that out of anything else. And I would always have the same answer, which is do what you want, but don't. The only thing I ask is don't have you know Green Lantern suddenly go, listen, I flew out and Krypton's still there, so I don't know what you've been telling everybody. But I was just there, and by the way, here's a big hunk of kryptonite, and it has no effect on you at all. Like, and we'd laugh, like, because we're fanboys, but he understood that there are some things you just can't do because they're cool. But the flip side of it is that, like, it's look, no one's going to write a better Harlequin Joker than Paul Dini. It just isn't. Okay. And a lot of it is affected by the animated series. So that's in my head. So things like Puddin and the fact that she sort of talks like a Warner Brothers character, like you can tell me until tomorrow that, but that's not who Harley is now. Harley's now educated and erudite and has a real relationship with Poison Ivy. Great, super, love that. Go do that. I'm just going to have her go back and be with Mr. J. And I know that there are people there. And I got this on when Jim and I started on Hush 2. Like people wrote in and said, it's like Jeph Loeb hasn't read a comic in 20 years. Yeah, maybe. Or maybe it's just this is the way I hear it in my head, and I don't write like Tom King. Thank God, because Tom is an amazing writer. Scott Snyder is an amazing writer. Let their voices come through and do what they're going to do. Is uh, Look, continuity has never been my friend, and I've told this story 100 times, which is the way I feel about continuity in comics is Jimmy Olsen never became Robin, and everything else is cream cheese. You're free to tell whatever story you want.
Yeah.
And I've made a promise, and my hope is that Mark Waid doesn't piss me off and decide to tell the story before I get to do it. But when I tell my Jimmy Olsen is Robin story, that's it. I'm done. That's my way of saying, guys, this is the it'll probably be the last Jimmy Olsen story. It will probably be the name of the story. And it's just me saying goodbye. Like if I embrace the one continuity change that I don't think should change. But I was in the room when Ed Brubaker pitched the idea of bringing back Bucky, um, and I remember the horror in everybody's face, like Bucky alive, no. Um, but when you heard his pitch for the Winter Soldier, you just went, that's so fucking cool. And it only works if it's Bucky. Like, yes, the Winter Soldier is a cool character, but he's a cool character because he's Bucky grown up. And the number of people who thought that Hush should have been Jason Todd. No, no, no. Jason had his own story to tell. By the way, he was dead. And I was trying to respect the fact that he was dead. So yes, was it a trick? It absolutely was. Did it fool everybody? It absolutely did. Does it still make people angry? It absolutely does. But I explained it. It was Clayface, and it was part of the game that they were playing. And but Jim drew Jason grown up, and it was so cool that DC went, we should bring Jason back to life. And then it was Judd Winnick and it was Jeff Johns and it was a bunch of other people who figured that out. If they had come to me and said, do you want to bring Jason back to life? I would have said, are you out of your minds? No, he's dead. It's part of the story. Like, it's part of what makes Batman. The fact that one of his Robins died, which was really Frank Miller's idea in The Dark Knight, like, that's a much better story than Jason's back to life.
Right.
And again, not taking anything away from what Judd and Jeff and hundreds of other people who've worked on the Jason Todd character. But I look at that and I go, he's still dead. Like there's some characters, if you can come up with a cool way of making somebody come back to life, I don't believe, like right now, like it's a mistake that Alfred's dead. It just is. Like Alfred is part of the lore of who Batman is. He's a father figure. He's his doctor. He's his conscience. He's all those things. And killing him, you got nothing out of it. Now, what Matt Fraction's doing in that book and the idea that there's a niece or whoever the young Pennyworth is that's the new butler, great, super. It's a great idea. I'm not saying it's not a great idea, but it's not Alfred. So someone someday is going to figure out how to bring Alfred back to that story. And you want to know why? Because he's in the movie. And Andrew Sarris is playing the part. And I'm sure there's a day when Andrew Sarris is going to go to James Gunn and go, what do you mean my character's dead? And James Gunn's going to pick up the phone and go, fix this. Yeah. Because Andrew Sarris is more important than whatever's going on in that comic. And I made that entire story up. And I'm not saying that's the kind of person that James is. And I'm not saying that Andrew Sarris would ever say those things. But I'm telling you that, but it's got to be a great story. It's got to be Winter Soldier. You can't just all of a sudden have Alfred walk in and go, ha ha, it was a fake. Like, you have to, like, figure it out. You do that with villains all the time. Villains are the easiest ones to suddenly go, ha ha, I'm back. And you don't even have, like, if you spend a page explaining how the villain came back, you're wasting a page. I saw Doctor Doom, I think in one of his first appearances, get thrown out of a spaceship and float away into space. He was dead. There was no world that he wasn't dead. And then in the next issue, he wasn't dead. That wasn't like a whole explanation as to how he got back. Maybe he put on rockets or his helmet came on and he could breathe or whatever nonsense you come up with. But when you have a singular character that's been part of the core legacy for more than 50 years, more than 80 years, what are you doing? Like, okay, you got a great shock out of it, but it's not. That's why I'm not the biggest fan of the night when Stacy died. There was so much more to tell with Gwen than there was with Mary Jane. And then look what they did. They married them, then they unmarried them, and now they're standing around going, now what do we do? And how do we come up with somebody that's as good as Gwen? You can't, because you don't have the legacy. So you got to fix it.
So thinking about a little bit too, you do like Batman, Wonder Woman, Truth, right? Which are coming out soon. When you think about Batman and Wonder Woman, once again, you have a interaction between these two characters that have been around for decades. There's a lot of story there between them being friends, simply teammates, potentially love interest. Where do you come in with their characters on? Where did you decide this is where I believe they belong?
Well, the important part about that story was that, and again, some of this is the comedy of life, is that the story was supposed to come out before Hush 2. Okay. It was what happened in between Hush 1 and Hush 2. It was a bridge story. So I began with the idea that if Clark knew and that's how I refer to Superman. It's just he's Clark to me. If Clark knew that Batman and Catwoman had broken up, someone had to make sure that Bruce was okay. Not that Batman was okay, but that Bruce was okay.
Hmm.
And there was only one person who could do that, and not get what Bruce would have given even to Clark, which is I'm fine, stop asking.
Yeah.
And that's why it's called truth. It's she's there to make sure that he's okay.
Hmm.
And then there's a huge battle and a robbery, and Catwoman's involved, which makes it even more complicated because she's the reason why Batman's not at his best. And then, yeah, Joker and Harley Quinn are running around in the story. And, there's people out there going, Jeph Loeb brought Harley Quinn and Joker back together again. No, I didn't. The story took place when they were together. And he's not very nice to her. So I am being very respectful to the people who currently would say, I don't understand. She hates him. She was abused by him. She would never go back to him. You're right. But at this point in the story, she was in an abusive relationship. And it's a counterpoint to what maybe could have happened with Batman and Catwoman. And then there's Wonder Woman who's standing sort of in the middle as the scale of justice, trying to figure out what's the truth.
Hmm.
And that's where it came from. And I was so intimidated by writing Wonder Woman that I went to the one person who I knew that would keep me honest, and that was Alan Heinberg, who had written her and written the movie, and he said to me, the one thing you've got to be careful of is she never needs help. And even if Batman thinks that he's helping her, that's a bad idea. She's and don't spend 5 pages of the two of them arguing about I had it, I didn't have it. Like nobody wants to see that.
Yeah.
Just show that she's capable, and he'll respect that. He would never try to save Superman in the same scene. So why would he bother to try to save her?
Hmm.
And that was such a revelation for me and enabled me to let her speak to him honestly and in a way that felt like it was different than Clark. Because Clark at the end of the day really does care about how Bruce feels. I think Diana looks at Bruce and goes, "You're messed up and you need help." And I'm more than happy to help you, but you have to want to be helped.
Hmm.
And and so that gave me the stuff to go along the way. But I have to give Alan credit because I would have had them like punching each other and he's like, what are you doing? Like it's like why are they hitting each other? Like what's the point?
Well, is it does Wonder Woman present a greater challenge to write than let's say Batman Superman because you're balancing a lot more with her. There's a warrior her version of her, superhero version, poetic version.
I can cut you off. You're asking me to write an adult woman. Period.
Yeah.
Like I, I'm not going to write her as well as other people are going to write her. I did my best. Um, I've written her a few times. I've always tried to give her a certain kind of regalness to her. Um, I rarely think she's wrong, um, but she doesn't come easily to me.
Hmm.
And when that happens, and you'll see when you read it, she doesn't talk a lot. Because and when you put her with Batman who doesn't talk at all, you have to kind of figure out, okay, how is this going to work?
Hmm.
And I'm lucky because you know how it's going to work. Jim Chung's artwork is so beautiful that I begged them. I said, guys, what Jay is doing with the color is astonishing. If
Hmm.
you don't do a black and white version of this, you are missing a huge segment of the audience because what Jim penciled and inked is magnificent. Every page you want to own. That's how beautiful it is. And it's just his angles, it's just his shots, it's just the way the expression on the characters' faces, how everyone looks completely distinct from each other. I mean, that's another problem I have with a lot of artists is that it's like, I mean, in fairness, when I started in comics, like the first book I had to do was Challenge the Unknown. I didn't know who the Challenge the Unknown were. I went out, I bought every Challenge the Unknown. They were all in a box at my comic book store. And the first few issues are done by Kirby. But in those days, coloring was done in a 3-color process. So it was like blue and red and yellow, and that was it. And if you mixed them up, you could get a brown or you could get a green or you could get something like that. But there was no digital coloring. That background that you have that's gorgeous, that's got this gorgeous cosmos behind you, that didn't exist in comics. And it looked more like what's behind me, a bunch of blur. Anyway, there were scenes where Murphy Anderson, who colored them, like the printer got it wrong. I'm not even blaming Murphy. Like I know him, Murphy, Mr. Anderson. And the part that's just hilarious to me is like two characters who looked almost exactly alike, but the way you could tell them apart was one had brown hair and one had yellow hair. They would be talking and they'd mix up the color, and I had no idea who was talking to who. And that's, again, I'm getting back to Jim Chung. Like when Wonder Woman is standing, posture, regal, there. Like Batman, half in shadow, Catwoman, curled up in some cat position. Like nobody knows how to draw like he does. Like the body language is so incredible. And that's what'll carry the story. Like, I don't, I mean, I know this is a terrible thing to say, but there's times where I go, guys, don't complain about the dialogue. Just look at the pictures. It'll be fine. It's like watching a movie. Turn off the sound if you hate whatever they're saying. Just enjoy it.
I think that's also the other interesting thing that you do have. Once again, I haven't had a chance to read the issue yet. Was you have Wonder Woman, Batman, Harley Quinn, Joker. Is there a mirror there between them as teammates and how they interact with each other?
You'll have to read the story. And Catwoman plays a much bigger role than even the Joker and Harley Quinn.
Okay.
So it's I'm really proud of it. I think it's beautiful, and I can't wait for people to see it. This is the best thing that I can tell you.
From a continuity, is this post the marriage episode where they break up at that in that issue?
No, it literally is a few weeks after Hush ends. Hush
Okay.
1. So they've broken up. In theory, they have not spoken to each other since they broke up. And now something happens where they are together. And Wonder Woman is there to make sure Bruce is okay. But now it's sort of like you're hanging out with your ex. Is that a good idea? Like, so that to me is more important to the story than what happens in the plot.
Is Catwoman, Selena Kyle, worried if Bruce is okay in your opinion, or is it just like they're done?
You'll see.
Okay.
She definitely has an opinion about it. That's for sure.
Because when does Batman Wonder Woman Truth come out?
I'm really bad at that stuff. I think it's in April, but I don't want somebody going, I went to the store in April and it wasn't there. Like, you know what? I'm not in charge of that. I'm in charge of it's coming out this year. That's much I know.
I mean, I can't wait to read that. And going back to X-Men of Apocalypse, you're up to the second issue's out right now on that book out of I believe it was 4.
I mean, we're way past that, so I always have to think about it. So it's the Alpha 1 and 2.
Right.
I guess 3 is not out. I guess 4 is not out. Like I'm just sort of sitting there going, sometimes when things are done, you sort of go, why isn't it out? But again, I don't work in that department. It's usually, why isn't it out? Because I'm late. Like, I
Well,
never
I mean,
put it on my artists.
I got to read the first two the issues of X-Men Apocalypse, and I really enjoyed them. Is there a chance this team is going to last, or is it you're doing four and done?
Well, first of all, it's Alpha 4 and then Omega.
Okay.
So it's really at the end it's more like 8 issues because the two ends are double size. Um, that's up to to Marvel. That's not up to me. I haven't signed on. I think anything they do with Simone, they're going to be lucky to have him do. Um, they, Tom Brevoort, the editor, has brought up some ideas as to what he wants to do with those characters, those that survive and those that don't. And we got a lot of story ahead of us. Right now you're at like they just ran into the original X-Men. There's so much more that they have to do before they
Yeah.
get done. That yeah, I mean, I'm basically telling 2 years worth of stories in about 6 issues.
Well, well, like I said, I mean, I really enjoyed enjoying X-Men Apocalypse so far, and I can't wait for the Batman story. Mr. Loeb, absolute honor to speak with you, sir. Can you come back on the show to talk when these issues they all finish up?
I'd be happy to as long as you call me Jeph and not Mr. Loeb.
Sorry, I gotta get
The
used
only
to
thing,
that.
the only thing that we didn't talk about, and I want to make sure that everybody knows, is that Jim is almost finished with the last issue of the first part of Hush 2. That is absolutely supposed to be out in March or April.
It didn't push it
And
to May just recently. I
uh,
read that.
okay, that's possible. Again, nobody asked me. But there's 5 issues of that have come out. Beautiful. Jim at his top of his gear. Um, and then there's going to be a break, and then we're going to do the last 6 issues of that story.
Mm.
But Jim is adamant that he has all 6 issues done. And I've said to him, Jim, we can't have his book come out in 2030. Like, I would kill myself before I have to still write this thing. And so I would say in 2027, we will see the rest of the Hush story. And that sort of concludes what I like about it is that it kind of ties up everything that happened before Matt Fraction. So that it's kind of the end of an era of Batman and a kind of telling of Batman stories that Matt's the next era. And that's great and that's exciting. It was supposed to be, brilliant. We were supposed to be done and then Matt would start and everything would be great. But, Jim has 3 really excellent excuses. One, he's the publisher of the now largest comic book company, no small part due to him. 2, he gets asked to do things that nobody else gets asked to do. When the Superman movie came out and crypto suddenly exploded, gee, you could have figured that out. You have a flying dog in your movie. But as soon as the movie came out, Milkbone, the largest makers of dog pet food, came along and said, we want to do a crypto cover on the Milkbone box. So who's going to draw that? Jim. And because Jim is the way that he is, it took 3 days for him to draw a box, like one image on a box. Those were 3 days that were supposed to be Hush pages.
Yeah.
So that's part of his job. And then the not so secret is he has 9 kids. 9 kids. Or as he likes to say, every weekend there's either a baby, a marriage, a graduation, or someone going to get married. And God bless him because he's such a great dad. But how do you get anything done?
Right.
But the nice part about it is that I work in a different business. I work in a business which is that these are collections, these are stories. And just in the same kind of way that we all learned that in between seasons of The Sopranos or in between seasons of Game of Thrones, sometimes it was a few months, sometimes it was a year. You got over it. And the one that I love to tell is Star Wars Chapter 4
like, well, they didn't know there was going to be a sequel. Turns out to be one of the biggest movies of all time. 3 years later, out comes The Empire Strikes Back. I took my son when they had the first re-release, which I think was in like the 2000s.
Yeah.
And he watches the movie for the first time, completely enthralled, and says, "When's the next one?" And I said, "In like 3 weeks, they're going to bring out." He goes, "3 weeks?" I said, "I waited 3 years. Like, 3 weeks is nothing." But it's the same thing. Like, I just know that when I know it's annoying, there's nothing better than feeding the dragon.
Yeah.
I love going to the comic book store, getting the book the next month or the third week is going to be Batman with Hush and Jim Lee. I'm there. I'm going to be there. You're going to wait. And at some point, for a lot of people, they're never going to read it until there's some people who've already decided when the first issue came out. And when I'm not reading this, I'm just collecting it. And then when it's all collected, I'm going to read it all together. And I'm really lucky. It's been 30 years since Long Halloween. It's been 20 years since Hush. It's been about the same for Superman Batman with Michael Turner. There's been Spider-Man Blue is, I think, 15 years, more than that, maybe 20. Like, for people to be able to enjoy stories that I told 20, 30 years ago now, and to read them for the first time. That's why I love going to comic conventions, because fans come up and go, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, my dad, my whatever gave me this. It's unbelievable. And I'll just be going, yeah. And I've written stuff since then. But, but thank you.
Well, speaking of that, Terrificon, I'm going to see you in August. I'm going to Terrificon in August, and you're going to be there. So
it will be the first time.
It will be the first time. Oh my God. I can't wait actually for that one.
Well, thank you. Jeph, listen, we've talked. This is what happens. Your 20 to 30 minutes turned into 2 hours. And it's more than okay. I hope that who's ever listening to this survived past 15 minutes, or watches it in 5-minute little intervals. It doesn't matter to me. I had fun. Great questions. I know I blah, blah, blah a lot.
No worries.
I hope you had fun.
But I do want you to come back when the issues are finished, so we can talk about what I got to read.
You know how to find me.
Thank you, Jeph, so much.
All right. Take care.